Okay, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I thank you for participating in today's NTD Annual Reporting for Tribes for Report Year 2018 webinar. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. We are pleased to have Bailey Krouse and Courtney Springer as our presenters today. Bailey Krouse joined the NTD team in 2014. She is a graduate of Michigan State University and currently serves as the validation manager for the National Transit Database Rural Reporting Module. Courtney Springer joined the NTD team in 2015. She is a graduate of the University of Virginia and currently serves as a validation analyst for the Rural Reporting Module of the National Transit Database. Today's webinar consists of Bailey and Courtney presenting their material, followed by a question and answer session at the end. You can participate in the discussion by using the chat pod that is located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. I will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, and we will save your questions for the end if they do not get answered. If you haven't already printed out or have handy a copy of the presentation, you can get it from the handout pods in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Or you can use the links in the notes section, but that's not a clickable link. You have to copy that and paste it into your browser. I guess that covers everything, and I will now turn the presentation over to Bailey and Courtney.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this presentation. We look forward to covering the Tribal Transit NTD reporting requirements this afternoon. Here's the contact information for the National Transit Database, as well as the phone number and email address for the NTD Help Desk. The Help Desk line is open from 8 o'clock a.m. until 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so the presenters for today will be Bailey Krouse, who will cover the second portion of the presentation, and myself, Courtney Springer. Our contact information is listed here. This presentation will cover a basic overview of the NTD program, changes and policy clarifications for the 2018 report year, a brief review of the NTD system interface and user account management, a walkthrough of the annual report year kickoff, a step-by-step and form-by-form guide for completing the 2018 report, a review of how to submit the report, as well as an overview of the revision and closeout process. The NTD program was established by Congress to be the nation's primary source for information and statistics on all public transportation modes of the United States. NTD data is used in the Condition and Performance Report, which is FTA's biennial report on the nationwide capital investment needs for public transit. NTD data is also used as a source for performance measure benchmarking, as well as for research purposes. All state DOTs, American Indian tribes, and U.S. territories who benefit from the FTA 5311 program allotment report to the NTD. This also includes subrecipients or subgrantees of those funds. Previous recipients of those funds who have not reached the end of the reporting period are also required to report to the NTD. Future recipients of those funds may also report to the NTD on a voluntary basis. The requirement for agencies to file an annual NTD report stems from Chapter 53 of U.S. Title 49, which states that agencies receive 5311 funds under the condition that the agency comply with reporting requirements and the Uniform System of Accounts. NTD data is used for a number of purposes, including the formula apportionments, of which the tribal formula consists of $30 million, performance benchmarking, academic research, conditions and performance reports, and the Government Performance Results Act. Agencies report to the NTD based on their individual fiscal year periods. All agencies have 4 months following the end of their fiscal year to compile their data and submit the annual report. NTD has 3 primary reporting deadlines shown here. You can determine your NTD reporting deadline based on your agency's fiscal year end date. This is an overview of the 5311 formula program. The red circled portion on this graphic represents the formula that is dispersed to Indian tribes. The formula is divided between discretionary and formula funds. The formula funds are split into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is based on the number of vehicle revenue miles an agency operates during the fiscal year. Tier 2 is equally divided among tribes who operate at least 200,000 vehicle revenue miles during their fiscal year. Tier 3 is apportioned to tribes who have more than 1,000 low-income individuals as determined by the Bureau of the Census. Note that no tribe shall receive more than $300,000 in Tier 3 funds. Beginning in Report Year 2018, reporting to the Transit Asset Management, or TAM module, will be required. State DOTs are required to offer to sponsor a group TAM plan for its subrecipients or participants. Data reported to the Transit Asset Management module will be more inclusive than the asset data you currently report to the NTD. There are 3 new forms in the report package as part of this requirement: the A15, A35, and A90 forms as applicable. We will discuss all 3 forms in more detail shortly. The TAM rule applies to all recipients of Chapter 53 funds who own, operate, or manage capital assets used in providing public transportation services. This includes all agencies that receive 5307 or 5311 funds must comply, in addition to their existing reporting requirements. This also includes agencies who may only receive 5310, 5339, or other Chapter 53 funds who previously were not required to report to the NTD. Note that these agencies must operate public transportation as defined by the NTD. This is the phase-in schedule for transit asset management reporting. For Report Year 2018, agencies are required to set their internal targets and report those targets to the NTD. Agencies are not required to submit a narrative report for meeting those targets, though they are welcome to submit the narrative report voluntarily. Agencies must report the condition data on all vehicles, including revenue and service vehicles. Finally, agencies must report all facilities used in public transit and for which the agency has capital replacement responsibility, but are only required to report a condition assessment for 1/4 of those facilities. On the B10 identification form, you will see a new question regarding whether your agency receives urbanized area or 5307 funds. This question defaults to no, as it is unusual for tribes to receive these funds. If you select yes, you will be required to provide clarification. Please reach out to your analyst if this is the case. On the B30 contractual relationship form, you will now have the ability to select whether the buyer or seller of service retains the fare revenues in a purchase transportation agreement. You will also be able to select Edit under the Key Financial and Operating Statistics section in order to update the contractual details. In previous report years, agencies would net the fare revenues and capital leasing from the total contract payment, and thus would report a net payment figure. To simplify this process, agencies now report the full contractual payment in its entirety, and the form will calculate the rest. There have also been changes to the Uniform System of Accounts, or USOA. The NTD uses uniform categories to collect public transit financial and operating information. These categories are defined in the USOA. These updates are intended to clarify reporting concepts to reporters and to increase the quality of data collected by the NTD. On the RR20 reduced reporting form, agencies now report fare revenues based on whether the fares were paid directly by the passengers or whether an organization covered the fares on the passenger's behalf. Furthermore, the donations and contract revenue fields have been removed from the non-federal funding section. Fare revenues are now split into two categories: passenger-paid fares, and organization-paid fares. Passenger-paid fares will capture the direct fares that are traditionally considered as passenger fares. Even if the fare rates differ based on passenger class, such as full fare, senior citizen fares, student fares, etc., these fares should be reported as passenger fares if they are paid directly by the passenger. Organization-paid fares represent fares that are earned from organizations who arrange transit service for its patrons. Examples include universities paying a transit agency to transport students for a free or reduced fare that the university later reimburses. Donations have been removed from the RR20 and consolidated with the other directly generated funds field. Additionally, all insurance recoveries should be reported as a new revenue class called total recoveries. Rather than being netted out, like in previous years, insurance recoveries should now be reported under other directly generated funds in the RR20. These revenues include insurance payouts, dividends or rebates, and funds that may be netted out towards future bills. Contract revenues have also been removed from the RR20 form. Funds that were previously reported to contract revenues should now be reported to either revenues accrued through a purchase transportation agreement or other directly generated funds. If you report to revenues accrued through a PT agreement, indicate whether the agreement is with an NTD reporter or a non-NTD reporter. Note that this only applies to full cost contracts in which the buyer pays the full cost of providing service. If the agreement is not a full cost contract, report the contract revenues to other directly generated funds. These funds should represent partial cost contracts if the agency is unable to report the original source of funds. Let's review the definitions for the most common transit modes tribes report to the NTD. Motor bus, or MB, is powered by a motor and fuel contained by a vehicle. Transit agencies must report any route deviation, point deviation, or deviated fixed route under the MB mode. Demand response, or DR, is a shared ride demand response service that is scheduled in response to calls from passengers. A transit agency employee operates demand response vehicles. Many transit systems operate demand response services to meet the requirements of the ADA. If you need to make any changes to your agency's modes, navigate to the P20 form on your agency's profile. According to accrual accounting requirements, revenue should be reported when it is earned, regardless of when the actual payment is received. For example, a passenger purchases $10 worth of fare, but only uses $5 during the fiscal year period. You would report the fare when the customer redeems the ride, rather than when the medium is sold. Expenses should be recorded when the liability for payment occurs, regardless of when the payment is made. For example, an employee receives a paycheck 10 days after it was issued. The paycheck date is in a new fiscal year. The agency would report the funds in the fiscal year when the employee performed the labor, as the agency was liable to pay the employee in that year. Operating expenses are day-to-day expenses that a transit agency incurs. This includes operating and maintaining vehicles, maintaining other equipment, buildings and grounds, and general admission, including marketing and customer support, finance and procurement, and planning and service development. Other examples include fuel, salaries, wages, benefits, materials and supplies, equipment lease and rentals, and insurance. For agencies that operate more than one mode of service, agencies must calculate both direct and shared costs of providing service in order to accurately report the total cost of operating each mode. Agencies should first determine which expenses are direct expenses, which are easily traced to one mode. After separating these direct costs, agencies should then determine which expenses are shared between modes that cannot easily be attributed to one mode or another. Once the shared expenses are separated from the direct expenses, agencies may allocate the shared costs based on an approved cost allocation method. Capital expenses are expenses related to the purchase of equipment. Equipment means an article of non-expendable personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year. The equipment must have an acquisition cost which equals the lesser of either the capitalization level established by the government unit for financial statement purposes, or $5,000. Common examples of capital include vehicles, maintenance facilities, or equipment. When reporting new vehicle-related capital expenses, you should report the expense under the predominant mode, or the mode which the vehicle supports the majority of the time. Capital assistance spent on operations are reported when capital funding is spent on activities that would normally be considered operations, such as preventive maintenance and the purchase of tires. If you have capital assistance spent on operations to report this year, please make sure you report these funds separately from your normal 5311 operating expenses, as these funds are typically subject to different match requirements. Here are some key reference documents that can assist you in completing the NTD report. The NTD Glossary and Annual Reporting User Guide are both located under the Manuals section of the Ntd homepage. The Uniform System of Accounts outlines the basic accounting structure all NTD reporters must follow. This resource is also posted on the NTD program website. NTD has additionally published new reference documents for further guidance, including the Reduced Reporting Policy Manual. The policy manual is issued annually to provide updated and detailed guidance for NTD reporting. This year, FTA has published separate manuals for full urban reporters and reduced reporters. Another new document is the TAM Facility Performance Measure Reporting Guidebook, which details the methods for transit agencies regarding measuring and reporting their TAM facility condition assessments to the NTD. The links to these documents are provided here. This is the NTD homepage, which houses all support documents, as well as the login portal for annual reporting. When you log into the reporting system, you will be directed to the News page. This page includes updates and general announcements from NTD staff. The Tasks tab includes all task items which are assigned to your user account. Tasks are typically assigned to CEOs, CEO delegates, and NTD contacts unless those users reassign the task to other user roles. Tasks are usually prompted by incomplete or unsaved forms. Agency reporting forms and profile information can be accessed through the Records tab. This is also the tab you should select when completing the NTD report. In the reporter profile, you may reference data that typically does not change from year to year, such as your agency's basic information, reporter modes, and reporter users. If you would like to update any of this information, navigate to your profile and select Related Actions. The e-file library contains historical communications from previous report years, including reporter requests such as extension requests. The form library contains your agency's historical reports from previous report years. Open the form library if you wish to reference the annual report from last year while completing this year's report. Related Actions under your agency's profile allows you to update your basic information or print your annual report package, including prior year's reports. Every NTD reporting agency must submit an official letter designating 1 or 2 employees as their user manager. User managers create accounts for all users, as well as update roles or deactivate users. The user manager may also fill an NTD role. For example, the CEO user may also be an agency's user manager. For more information on user management in the NTD system, please refer to the FTA Faces User Guide, which is posted on the NTD homepage. The role your user account has in the reporting system will determine your level of permissions. The CEO and CEO delegate roles have the highest level of permissions. These users may create reporter requests, such as waiver requests or extension requests. They may also submit the annual report package, as well as view and edit all forms and issues. NTD contacts may submit the annual report revisions after the original submission is submitted by the CEO, as well as view and edit all forms and issues. Editors may only view and edit forms and issues, while viewers may only view forms and issues. While logging into the system, if you have forgotten your account password, you may select the Forgot Password link on the main login screen. Enter your email address as your username and select Send Email. This will send a link to your inbox, which will allow you to reset your password. Note that the link is only good for 15 minutes. If you do not reset your password within this window, follow the procedure again. User accounts become locked due to inactivity if you have not logged in within 60 days. There are two methods to unlock your account. You can unlock your own account by answering your security questions. Select Actions, then Unlock Account, then Answer Security Questions. You will have 3 attempts to correctly answer your questions. The other method is to request to be unlocked by your agency's user manager. Select Actions, Unlock Account, then select the option to request to be unlocked. The user manager will receive a task to review and approve your unlock request. Please note that you must choose this option if you have not established your security questions or if you cannot remember the correct answers. To create or manage your security questions, select your profile avatar at the top of the page, then select Profile. Select Related Actions on the following page, then Manage Security Questions. The Manage Security Questions screen will populate for you to create 3 questions. The first step in completing the annual report is completing the report year kickoff process. This process sets up your report package for the year. Completing the kickoff will allow you to update user roles as needed, add or edit modes as needed, add or edit your TAM plan sponsor, confirm your reporter type for this year, as well as confirm your reporter type for next year. The kickoff can only be completed by the CEO, CEO delegate, or NTD contact. Those users would navigate to their Tasks tab and select the report year kickoff item. Accept the task and select Proceed, or reassign the task to another user. The first step is verifying your agency's users. You may update their contact information or user roles as needed. If you need to add new users to your agency's profile, please contact your user managers. Next, verify your agency's modes. If you reported to NTD last year, your existing modes will pre-populate on this page from last year's report. You will not need to enter any new information unless you have terminated your service. Note that you should not enter an end date for any modes unless the service has ceased operations. For all new agencies who are completing an NTD report for the first time, enter all modal information on this page. Here are the 2 most common modes that tribes report to the NTD. Again, deviated fixed route services should be reported under Motorbus, and demand response services should be scheduled in response to passenger need. If you add a mode during the kickoff, report the commitment and start dates for that mode. The commitment date reflects when capital funds were first applied, and the start date reflects the first day of revenue service or the first day of transporting passengers. Remember to leave the end date field blank if the service is still in operation. Next, select your transit asset management sponsor if you intend to participate in a group TAM plan. If you do not intend to participate in a group TAM plan and will instead file your own TAM report, click Continue at the bottom of the screen. If you do intend to participate in a TAM plan, search for your sponsor in order to link their group plan package to your agency's report package. Once the sponsor is selected, click Yes, Save and Submit if all information appears correct. Next, confirm your reporter type for this year. All NTD tribes are small systems reporters, so ensure that the Change Reporter Type question is selected to No, as you will not be changing your reporter type for 2018. The next step will be confirming your reporter type for the next report year. Again, ensure that No is selected for the Change Type question. Once you have completed the kickoff, the system will begin to generate your report forms based on the information you provided during this process. It may take up to 3 minutes for your 2018 package to generate. Click OK to end the task. To open your 2018 report package and begin entering your data, select Records, Ntd Report Packages, 2018 Package, and then select Annual Forms in the top right-hand corner. Click on the individual report form you wish to view and edit. This is the typical list of report forms a tribe must complete in the annual report. We will overview each of these forms for the remainder of this presentation. The B10 form contains your agency's basic identifying information. Under General Information, you will be able to edit the data by using the drop-down to select your agency's organization type. Your organization type should be populated from the prior year, but if it is not, please select Tribe. Remember that the question regarding 5307 funds will newly appear in the B10 form. Again, if you do not receive 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Program funds, ensure the response is selected as No. Directly below the basic information section is the demographic information. If you serve multiple states or enter an urbanized area, you will click on Add USOA and add the applicable areas here. Next, report the appropriate tribal area for your agency. Tribal area selections are based on U.S. Census Bureau data. Report the areas you operate in according to Ntd Serve rules, which can be found in our policy manual posted on the Ntd homepage. To add your tribal area if it is not pre-populated, begin to type in the name of the area. A list of options will appear, and you will be able to enter it onto the form and save it. If you have any questions on what your tribal area is, or if it is missing from this list, please contact your analyst. Do not update modes filing a separate Ntd report unless you contract a separate service that will capture the service data in another report. We will discuss this scenario momentarily. When you are finished, select Save and Validate. The B30 form captures information for contracts with other agencies. If you directly operate all of your own service and do not operate on behalf of another agency, you will not need to add this form. The Ntd requires agencies that buy transit service to report this service as purchased transportation as long as it meets these 3 criteria. The buyer of service must pay the full cost of operations for this service. The service must also operate in the name of the buyer, which includes vehicle branding. Finally, the seller must operate and manage the service. If you believe this scenario applies to your agency, please reach out to your analyst for confirmation. On the first section of the new B30 form, indicate whether the other party is an Ntd reporter or a private company. In most cases, the agency will be an Ntd reporter. If you select Ntd reporter, search for this agency from a list generated by the Ntd database. Select their agency name and hit Continue. Now report the details of this contract. We'll say in this example that the reporter is the buyer. Because the reporter refers to the entity completing the report, the tribe in this example is purchasing transit service. The 3 types of contracts for Ntd reporting purposes are competitively bid, negotiated contracts, and subsidies. Competitive contracts include sealed bids, requests for proposals, and 2-step procurement. Typically, agencies that contract with other public agencies enter into a negotiated agreement, and agencies that contract with a private company enter into a competitively bid contract. The primary feature describes how the buyer funds the service, whether they pay the seller a negotiated fixed rate per unit of service, whether that's miles, hours, ridership, or some other factor, or if the buyer reimburses the seller's net operating expenses based on an approved budget. Indicate who reports the service for this particular contract. This relates back to that filing separately section on the B10. If the selection here is that the service is captured in another report, the filing separately section on the B10 form should indicate which purchase transportation mode will be capturing this data. Next, indicate whether the seller keeps the fare revenues generated from this contracted service or if the seller returns the fare revenues back to the buyer. Indicate whether the buyer provides any public assets to the seller for operating service, such as vehicles, maintenance facilities, or other public assets. After completing the basic summary information for this contract, select Add New Mode/Type of Service and add the appropriate modes related to this service. The list of possible modes are automatically populated from the P20 form of the profile. Next, select Edit to begin entering the key financial and operation statistics for this contract. Complete all required fields in this section. Report the number of vehicles operated in an annual maximum service under this contract, which represents peak service hours. Also report the number of months the seller operated service during the report year. We will overview the remaining fields, which involve financial details, in the next slide. Report all purchase transportation fare revenues generated by the service, regardless of which entity retains the fares. You must also report the total direct payment the buyer makes to the seller. Note that this is a change from last report year. This field represents the total annual contract payment rather than a net value, which agencies use to report. Report any capital leasing expenses if that expense applies to your agreement. This represents expenses that the seller charges the buyer for use of its capital assets, such as vehicles or maintenance facilities. You do not have to report a value for capital leasing if the buyer provides all assets used in service. Finally, report other costs incurred by the buyer, which represents any additional expenses the buyer incurred as part of maintaining the agreement, aside from actual payments made to the seller. This category is divided into other operating expenses incurred by the buyer and other reconciling item expenses incurred by the buyer, which can include leasing costs or interest costs. Once you have completed all required fields in this form, select Save and Validate. Note that if this agreement has been terminated and did not operate at all during the report year, the B30 form can be removed by selecting the Remove Contractual Relationship option. Tribal subsidies are a unique type of agreement. In these instances, an agency contributes an annual subsidy to a local transit provider, but does not cover the full operational cost. The tribe also does not operate service directly or purchase other modes. Thus, subsidies do not meet the threshold of full cost contract by NTD definition. So let's say a tribe pays a local transit provider a fixed amount per year to operate a bus route extension. The provider adds several stops along one route to service the reservation. The buses are branded as and managed by the provider. Since the tribe is not covering the full cost of this service, they would report the financial contribution as a subsidy and not as a contract. In another example, a tribe contracts with a private company to operate demand response services. The tribe covers the full cost of operations, brands the vehicles as tribal transit, and manages all scheduling and dispatching operations. The tribe in this instance would report this as a full cost contract and would complete a B30 form for the agreement. If you have any questions about how to report a contract with another provider, please reach out to your analyst. Okay, so this is Bailey. I'm going to be taking over for Courtney now. We are going to start up with the A10. So the Stations and Maintenance Facility Form, or A10, captures the type and number of maintenance facilities utilized for the provision of public transportation. These assets are reported based on the capacity and ownership types. You'll also report the number of passenger stations that are owned across the modes. Agencies must complete one A10 form per mode and type of service. You can see that facilities are categorized by ownership type along the top row. If one facility is shared by 2 or more modes, you may report a prorated share based on the number of vehicles it services. For example, if you operate a dollar a ride or demand response service, as well as a fixed route bus service and own one facility, and there are 10 owned vehicles in total, the demand response mode uses 6 of the vehicles and the bus mode uses 4. So in this case, you would report 0.6 of facility for the demand response mode and 0.4 of a facility for the bus. Please note that if you do use this prorated method, the sum of all the facilities should always be a whole number. The A15 form will collect basic information on facilities that are used to supply the public transportation service and is a required form going forward. If your agency does not have any facilities, the form needs to be saved and validated as blank. As a note, if you do save it as blank, during validation you will be asked to confirm that the form was meant to be left blank. On this form, you will report administrative and maintenance facilities for which you have capital responsibility for. However, you will report passenger and parking facilities regardless of your capital responsibility. We will mention capital responsibility a lot with regards to the expanded asset inventory module. Please see the list here to determine whether or not your agency does have direct capital responsibility for an asset. For number 3, an infrastructure asset itemized as a capital line item in the budget does not necessarily mean an agency has direct capital responsibility. An agency must also have management or oversight responsibilities for that line item project. In addition, performing minimal preventative maintenance work doesn't necessarily indicate direct capital responsibility. It's a huge mouthful, but we will be talking about capital responsibility a lot throughout the rest of the presentation, so just make sure you're understanding what this means. All right, so examples of the facilities that you're going to report are administrative buildings, combined administrative and maintenance facilities, and maintenance facilities. Examples of administrative activities may include finance, accounting, engineering, customer services, scheduling, and planning. If the agency has an owned facility on the A10, we would expect them to have a facility entered on this form. In addition, if you have capital responsibility for a bus barn where no maintenance is taking place, you would still report this facility and you would report it as a general purpose maintenance facility / depot. As mentioned in the slide, more types are found in the Ntd policy manual on page 82. All right, this is the A15 form. So to fill it out, you'll first click on the Add Facility link. This will allow you to enter the data into the 3 sections: facilities information, condition assessment, and address. We will now go over which is in each section. In the facility information section, you will fill out the name of the facility that the agency uses for it, the primary mode it services, such as demand response or commuter bus, any secondary modes that it may service. So if it is primarily servicing that demand response mode, commuter bus might be the second mode that it helps assist. The type of facility you are reporting, as mentioned in the previous 2 slides ago, the year that it was built or reconstructed as new, the square footage. If it holds parking, it will allow you to enter how many parking spaces it has, and the capital responsibility the agency has towards the facility, which will be in percentage form. And if there are any notes that you would like to add, mentioned 2 slides ago, if you do select the combined administrative and maintenance facility, please enter a note explaining the functionality of the facility. And after entering all the applicable data, please click on Continue. In the next section of the A15, you will fill out the condition assessment, which will be an integer value of 1 through 5, as well as the estimated date of the condition assessment, which will be when it was built or when it was reassessed. The name of the facility will carry over from the first section, and the ID will be assigned once you save. In the last section is going to be the address section. You will enter the full address, and once finished with all these sections, you will click on Continue. You can either enter the address or the latitude, longitude. Address is usually a little easier. If you do enter the latitude, longitude, just make sure you enter any applicable negative signs because we don't want you to end up on the other side of the world. Okay, So upon clicking continue from that last section, you will be sent to the summary page of the A15. From here, you can save and validate, or edit your facility by clicking on the name of the facility or checking off the radio button next to it and clicking on Edit Selected. Okay, so next form down is the A30 form, or Revenue Vehicle Inventory form. Is where you were going to report all the revenue vehicle inventory data. This will be pretty familiar to you all. This is not a new form. You'll categorize your vehicles and fleets, identify basic vehicle information, and report the funding and ownership type for all revenue vehicles. Revenue vehicles are going to be those that are transporting passengers. Okay, so if you filled out this form last year and did not make any changes or change modes, 2017's data will pre-populate. You will only need to report new fleets or edit existing fleets. If you are new to NTD reporting, you will enter all vehicle information manually. You might either click Add Fleet at the bottom to report a new fleet, or select an existing fleet by clicking on Edit Fleet. The agency fleet ID was added in Report Year 2017 to assist with reporters in understanding what vehicles belong to what fleets. Another addition was the No Capital Responsibility checkbox, which is now required. You will select this if your agency has no capital replacement responsibility towards the fleet. Checking off this box will remove the requirement for reporting a useful life benchmark for this fleet. Below that is an area where you can enter notes on the fleet as applicable. Below the notes section will be the useful life benchmark section, which is required in Report Year 2018 for all fleets for which you have a capital responsibility for. You will fill out this information for all existing fleets. FDA has outlined a default useful life benchmark for each vehicle type, but transit agencies may adjust as applicable. Once the useful life benchmark is filled out, the useful life remaining years will be updated automatically. Again, revenue vehicles carry passengers, service vehicles assist in the provision of public transit, and are those such as tow trucks. And we'll go over service vehicles in a moment. All right, so please feel free to save this form as you go through it. When finished, you will click on Save and Validate. Saving assigns the RVI ID if the fleet was newly added. I want to take a moment to review the data element manufacture year. The manufacture year is when the vehicle was built. This may not match the model year. If you have historically reported the model year, please go back and report the manufacture year for all vehicles, as this helps determine the correct useful life benchmark and remaining years for each fleet. A common question we receive is, what is the difference between active and inactive vehicles? Transit agencies must report the number of active vehicles in the fleet as of the end of their fiscal year. Active vehicles provide regular service and include spare vehicles. Inactive vehicles are awaiting sale or disposal, are in storage, or are part of an FTA-approved emergency contingency plan, or are out for major repairs. All right, so the next one is, what is the difference between retiring versus deleting? Please remember to retire fleets that are no longer in service rather than deleting them. Fleets should only be deleted if they were added to the mode incorrectly. To retire a fleet, you will update the active vehicles to 0. Once that occurs, the question, is the fleet retired, appears, and you will select yes. Doing so will remove the record for the next year, so when you do kick off 2019, that fleet will no longer be there. There are some common validation issues we see during the report year. If you do indicate that a vehicle is used for another mode, please make sure to use the Add Existing Fleet button to copy over the data to the other mode as needed. If you report new vehicles on the A30, we would expect to see corresponding capital funding in your financial data unless there are certain special circumstances. You must complete all fields on the A30 without leaving anything blank. We do see vehicle length just kind of get skipped over sometimes, so just make sure when you're saving and validating everything is there before you close out the form for the final time. Okay, so moving on to the A35 form is also required starting this report year. If your agency does not have any service vehicles, the form does need to be saved and validated as blank. And if you do, once again, leave it as blank. You will be asked to confirm that the form was left to be blank just like the A15. All right, so what do I mean by A35? The A35 collects data on different types of service vehicles used to indirectly deliver transit service and maintain the revenue vehicles. Agencies are required to report on fleets for which they have capital responsibility for, keyword, capital responsibility. Service vehicles are defined in the slide and include cars used for admin staff, transit police cars, and tow trucks. However, agencies should not report small forklifts and golf carts. This form will work the same way as the A15. To create a fleet, you will select Add New. Okay. The first section is the service fleet information, and it includes the fleet name, which will be what the agency calls it, the agency's fleet ID associated with the vehicle, the primary mode, any secondary modes, which will work exactly like the A15, the type of vehicle, the number of vehicles, the useful life benchmark of the vehicle, manufacturer year, and notes. There are 3 types of service vehicles: automobile, truck and other rubber-tired vehicles, and steel wheel vehicles. I doubt we'll see any steel wheel vehicles out of tribes. However, if you do have one, we will be asking you about it. As a note, if your agency does have more than one mode, the primary mode should be the mode that the fleet vehicles service the most, and this is at the agency's discretion. The second and final section of the A15, or A35, sorry, is the financial area. The fleet name and fleet ID will carry over from the first section. Then the agency will fill out the transit agency capital responsibility in percentage form, the estimated costs in the year dollars of estimated costs. Estimated costs will include the soft costs such as finance charges. This will be the most recent estimate of the full cost to replace the asset. If you do not have a recent estimate, you can report the original cost of the asset or its insured value. In regards to the year, if you do not have a recent estimate and do not know the insured value, and you report the original cost of the asset, you would report the year that you purchased the asset. If you have an insured value from your last fiscal year, you will report the year that it corresponds to. When all the information is saved and entered, and you're back on the summary page, you will either click on Save and Validate, and the form will work exactly like the A15. Right, the last asset form is the Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Target Form, or A90. It is required starting this report year for those who do not have a TAM group plan sponsor. So if you do have a group plan sponsor, this does not apply to you. For those that have their own plan, this form will apply to you. The A90 is where agencies report the portion of their assets that have met or exceeded the ULB cent, useful life benchmarks. They will compare the current year targets to the live data pulled from the asset forms. Once again, only the group plan sponsor or agency that has their own plan will complete this form. If you do have, or if you are part of a TAM plan, you may see this form at the bottom of your package, kind of separated, but it will not be editable, it will only be viewable. This slide is showing the types of measures that are per type of asset. For example, for a vehicle, it would be based on the useful life benchmark. As a note, you will not be required to report performance measures as found on the track section for infrastructure. Will not apply to reduced reporters. You are a reduced reporter if you are listening to me and are a tribe. Okay, the first section of the A90 will include rolling stock. As you can see here, there are grayed out sections under the 2018 target percentage. This means that there are no vehicles being reported that fall under those types, and the NA is selected. Please report targets for all applicable vehicle types and select NA for those that are not. The next section contains the equipment targets. This report is based on the 3 vehicle types of the A35, and this section will be filled out exactly the same way as the first section. So fill in the percentages. If it's not applicable, select NA. The third section contains the facility targets, and you'll be reporting the percentage of facilities that rate below a 3 on the condition scale. And the last item on the A90 is the narrative report, which will be uploaded and required starting in report year 2019. The narrative report will outline performance targets and your agency's progress towards those targets. These may include any changes within the transit system. All right, so all done with asset stuff, we're moving on to financial service and safety data, which we'll go over in more detail now. Okay, the RR20 includes the following financial, service, and safety data. When you open the RR20, the total funds expended by funding type at the top is the non-editable running total of the funding you are entering. This should match the manually entered total funds expended by mode and type of service in most instances before you submit your forms. The numbers circled in red, those should match. So right now they're zeros, but as soon as you fill in your information, those should match. As a reminder, finances should be reported as revenues expended, not earned. Grant awards may be larger than the amount actually expended during the report year. When reporting financials, please report the original source of funds which were spent and reimbursed. The example seen here explains that if you receive a grant for $750,000 but only spend $300,000, you would report the $300,000 on your NTD report. As mentioned before, agencies report expenses by mode and type of service. To separate these funds, you'll want to determine which expenses are direct and can be easily traced to a mode. These may include specific driver wages or vehicle repairs. Then you'll want to determine which expenses are joint, which are costs that are incurred for the benefit of more than one mode and cannot be easily traced. An example of this may be a transit manager's salary or dispatch staff. One moment, sorry. You may allocate those joint expenses or shared costs to each mode by an allocation factor such as vehicle revenue miles or vehicle revenue hours. Fare revenues include all income received and expended directly from passengers. This can come in a variety of forms like cash, prepaid tickets, reduced or subsidized fares, and donations. Donations made on board a transit vehicle at the fare box should be considered or classified as fare revenues. Again, as Courtney mentioned earlier, fare revenues are now broken out between passenger paid and organization paid fares. If you have more than one mode, you are required to capture and report the fares by mode and type of service. There are some there are some exceptions to this requirement as listed here. And if your agency is an exception to this rule, please make sure to make your analysts aware of this during validation so that we can note it for future reporting years. Going in order of the form, here are some examples of other directly generated funds. In addition, this is where the donations and insurance recoveries will be reported. We usually see a lot of advertising revenues and concession revenues in this specific area. So when you're filling it out, please make sure to comment as to what types of funds they are so we can make sure they're in the right fund. Revenues accrued through a PT agreement will be reported if you receive revenues from another agency that pays for the full cost of a service you provide, as long as it meets the definition of the NTD definition of purchase transportation. If it is a non-full cost contract, it will either go under organization paid fares or other directly generated funds, or if it can be traced back to the original source of funds, that's where you should put it. If you do have a question as to where the funding should go, please reach out to your ANOs and we'd be happy to assist you further. Below the directly generated funding section lies the non-federal funding section. Please enter your data accordingly based on what funds came from local funds, state funds, and other non-federal sources. Again, please be sure to report these funds based on operating and capital expenses. Next, you'll select all applicable funding sources from the list of federal programs. The various FTA programs are broken down in detail. If you expended funds from other federal grant programs, you would select whichever other category fits with the funding type. The selection will require a comment to describe the type of funding. If you just received 5311 tribal transit funds, you will click on FTA other than urbanized area funds. And then off to the side, that's where you can enter where the tribal transit funding amount is. Examples of other FTA funds will include those not listed already, such as Section 5308, FTA Clean Fuels Program. Examples of other federal funds may include HUD, but the most common type of funding that was reported is federal Medicaid. For service data, the miles and hours reported should only include revenue service, which is when the vehicles are transporting passengers or are able to transport passengers. This includes layover and recovery time. Revenue service does not include deadhead, driver training, school bus or charter services, and vehicle maintenance. As mentioned in the previous slide, deadhead includes miles and hours that a vehicle travels when out of revenue service. This includes leaving or returning to the garage or yard facility, changing routes, or when there is no expectation of carrying passengers. There are detailed tables found within the NTD policy manual which further clarifies what is considered revenue service for each mode. When reporting unlinked passenger trips, please include all passengers. These passengers are usually classified as regular or sponsored. Passengers are counted each time they board the vehicle, no matter how many vehicles they use from their origin to their destination. Sponsor trips, which are part of the unlinked passenger trip number being reported, are trips that are paid for in part or in full by a third party. These may be part of a coordinated human services transportation plan. Common sponsors are the VA, Medicare, and assisted living centers. Again, when reporting the unlinked passenger trips, please make sure the sponsor trips are part of that number. Vehicles operating an annual maximum service, or VOMS, are the number of revenue vehicles an agency operates to meet the annual maximum service requirement. VOMS are counted during the peak season of the year on the busiest day, but you will want to make sure to exclude any atypical days. This slide has an example of what is considered and what is not considered revenue service. Oh, sorry, wrong one. An example of how demand response revenue service was reported is seen here. Bob's dollar ride departs from the garage at 10:45 and drives 3 miles to a pickup point. He gets there at 11 o'clock and 5 passengers board the vehicle at 11:05. He then drives with the passengers for 3 miles and gets there at 11:15. The data that would result from this example would be 3 vehicle revenue miles, 0.25 vehicle revenue hours, and 5 unlinked passenger trips. This slide has examples of what is considered and what is not considered revenue service for the bus mode. When the bus departs from the dispatching center and is not carrying passengers and is not expected to have passengers, it is not considered revenue service. Once they reach the first stop until the last stop, it is not considered revenue, or it is considered revenue service. Then the last stop to the garage again when the bus is not expected to carry passengers is not considered revenue service. After completing the revenue service section, the safety data is the last item on the RR20. Reportable incidents include fatalities, injuries, or property damage that exceeds $25,000, collisions involving revenue vehicles that require towing away from the scene for any vehicle involved, or an evacuation for life safety reasons. Fatalities are reported when death occurs within 30 days of the incident, and injuries are reported when passengers are immediately transported away from the scene for medical attention. Okay, this is the layout of the RR20 for tribes reporting to a tribal subsidy report format. It is a condensed version of the form with only the non-federal and federal finance sections available for data entry. Report only the contribution as well as any administrative and overhead costs associated with managing this subsidy. Next, I would like to go over some common questions and validation issues we see as analysts. Some common validation issues we see with service data are agencies reporting their services scheduled hours or the driver's availability rather than the actual vehicle revenue hours. Calculating the vehicle revenue miles based on routes using Google Maps or some other method, or including deadhead in revenue service such as the examples listed here. If you're ever unsure of whether certain aspects of your service are reportable or not, please feel free to contact your analyst. Another common issue we see in the RR20 is related to financial totals not matching. Once you report the total funds expended and then break that total down by funding source, the sum of all the different funding sources should exactly match the total funds expended. Another issue is that the number of vehicles operated annual maximum service, or VOMs, is higher than the number of active vehicles reported on the A30. Active vehicles should be equal to or higher than VOMs. Finally, do not report more sponsored unlinked passenger trips than total unlinked passenger trips. As I mentioned before, your total passenger count should include sponsored trips, and you report the sponsored trips independently and on a different field. Okay, some common questions we receive about validation are ratio questions. When your analyst is reviewing your report, we are looking at how data points change from year to year, as well as how the data as a whole changes year to year. We include ratios such as cost per hour, which is the mode's cost divided by the mode's vehicle revenue hours, to see how your agency may have changed. It seems like our chat feature is a little bit delayed, but yes, the slides should be coordinated with what I'm talking about currently. Okay, the next form you'll see on your report package list will be the FFA-10. We're nearing the end. Okay, the federal funding allocation form allows agencies to allocate their vehicle revenue miles between multiple rural areas or non-USAs and urbanized areas or USAs as necessary. Agencies that receive 5311 funds from 2 or more states report how much of its service is operated in each state as needed. Okay, this is the layout of the form. The form will pull in service data as reported to the RR20. The first thing you will do is select your USOA reporting method. If you only operate within one state, select actual vehicle revenue miles. If you operate within more than one state, you can select actual vehicle revenue miles, or you can select actual data, and we'll discuss these methods shortly. You'll see under the item column on the far left, we have the total vehicle revenue hours, total unlinked passenger trips, non-fixed guideway vehicle revenue miles, which is just your revenue miles that you're reporting on the RR20, and the non-fixed guideway operating expenses, which is just the operating expenses pulled in from your RR20 again. As a note, you will have one FFA-10 form per mode, so you may see multiple. All right, if you select the actual vehicle revenue miles from the top drop-down, you'll be able to enter data into the VRM box, and the system will populate the rest of the data. If you only operate in one USOA, the total VRM on this form should be the same as the VRM reported on the RR20. If you operate in more than one non-USOA and will be splitting up the total between them, the total should always equal 100% of the miles reported on the RR20. Also, please note that the FFA-10 form does not update with changes to the RR20. If you complete the service data section of the RR20 and complete the FFA-10 form, but then you make revisions on the data to the RR20, you'll need to backtrack to the FFA-10 one more time to save and validate that data if it is different. If you operate in more than one USOA and track all the service separately for each non-USOA, you'll select the actual data USOA reporting method to report all actual service data between the non-USOAs. Seen here is an example of a tribe that goes into one or more areas as reported on the B10. Your agency will fill out the data accordingly between the areas as applicable. All right, so that's FFA 10 finished up. Now we're going to go on to the D10. The CEO certification form is pretty straightforward. The CEO will attest that all data captured in the Ntd report is accurate, truthful, and up to date. And then you also confirm your methods of collecting ridership data. Okay, once in the form, the CEO will read these statements and select their answer to both, either affirming or denying that all data are accurate and conform to the Ntd/USOA requirements. Once that's finished, they will click Save and Validate. After saving and validating, the CEO will click on that blue Unlinked passenger trip at the top and select how the agency collects the ridership data. In almost all cases with tribes, this method will be a 100% count of unlinked passenger trips, as seen in option A. And each mode will have a question. In each mode, you'll have to answer what type it is. So either select all A or select whatever is applicable to you. Okay. So finally finishing up, once you've completed all the forms, the submission process will now start. To get to the action, you will go to Records, then Ntd Report Package. Next, you will click on your 2018 report package. Please note that only the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the original submission or first draft of the Ntd report, and then the Ntd contact can submit all subsequent revisions as needed. Next, you'll click on the related actions and then select Submit Annual Report Package. If there are any open issues, non-saved forms, or missing required data points, you will not be able to submit the report. You'll want to go back into your package and complete the requirements to resolve the assorted issues. If all data is filled out and there are no issues preventing you from submitting, this page will appear and you will click Continue. The next page, you will click on Submit. After successfully submitting the report package, you will see a yellow notification box saying Action completed successfully. That's what you're looking for. If you want to confirm that the report package was completely submitted, please refer back to your report package summary page. The report should be listed as in review rather than working data if it is on the analyst's desk. Always, please feel free just to email or call your analyst saying, hey, I've submitted my report, did you get it? We're happy to answer anything, and if we didn't get it, we will let you know, of course. Okay, so just submitting the report doesn't mean you're done. There are a couple more steps that need to be taken in order to completely close out the report for the report year. Your assigned analyst will review the entire report for accuracy and consistency once you submit. They will compare the data submitted this year to data submitted last year for any significant changes, as well as ensure that all data was reported to the correct fields. Analysts are available for contact prior to your submission for any questions or concerns you may have, so please feel free to utilize them and reach out to them if you are unsure of any reporting requirements. Notes in the closeout letter typically relate to incomplete reports, which can mean either the data does not conform with Ntd definitions, accounting principles, or accrual accounting, or it can mean that the agency did not adequately respond to validation issues raised by the analyst. All identified issues must be fully addressed in order for the issue to be resolved. If either of these issues occur, Ntd cites them in the closeout letter. The best way to resolve validation issues is to provide solid and detailed explanations that give your analyst a clear picture of your service. Explain why the data changed from year to year, or what service changes took place to cause a significant shift in your data. If you find that last year's data was wrong, provide an explanation as to why it was wrong and why this year's data is correct. Please note that FTA does not accept this explanation for multiple years, and it may lead to a questionable data notation. All right, so as we start wrapping up to the report year 2018, you should already have heard from your analyst. If you haven't, please reach out to me, Bailey Krouse, and my information is provided here. Your analyst is here to guide you through the submission and validation process, so please, please, please do not hesitate to get in touch with them if you have any questions or concerns. Here is the contact information for our team, as well as the Ntd Help Desk line. It is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I know it was a very long presentation. We'll open up now to any questions that you may have.
Yes, just type your questions in the chat box, even though mine is severely delayed. Some of my stuff isn't even showing up, actually, so I apologize. There's not much I can do about that. It's the connection with Adobe Connect, I guess. So it doesn't look like anyone is typing, but I don't know if that's because I can't see it or no one's typing.
Yeah, I don't either, but I do have a question from Vito, but that will be, he is my, my reporter, so I'll answer that offline.
Oh, okay.
So Vito, I have your question and I will answer you. So thank you for writing me.
Mine's so delayed that I just, did you change it to slide D10 CEO certification? Because that just showed up on my screen. I don't know what's going on.
No, I'm on questions and comments.
That's not even show. We're looking into a new platform, just so you know. Hopefully next time we do this, I'll have a different platform and it will be smoother.
Absolutely. And if anyone does have any questions about anything that we presented here, please make sure to download the handout, as Lori mentioned earlier, and we can always reference specific slides if you have questions about them. The presentation is made for more of a, you have a presentation, you have a download, you can almost walk yourself through the system at least, and if you do have any policy questions, we're definitely here for that as well.
That's great. And again, you can download by clicking in handouts, or you can copy and paste the links, or if you have the email that was sent to you telling you how to get in here, the link should be on there as well. Do either of you see anybody typing?
Okay.
Mine is, yeah, mine's not.
I do not, but if anyone does have any questions and they're trying to type furiously, we're just not seeing it, please just feel free to email it to me at bailey.krouse.ctr@dot.gov, and I can help you out, or I can get your analyst on it so we are all on the same page.
Yeah, I apologize if you are typing like crazy and it's not showing up. I'm not really sure how to fix that. I'm sorry. So I guess we'll just assume no one has any questions rather than sitting here with dead air, I guess.
Okay.
All right. I'll just, all right. I'll wrap it up. Unless you have anything to add? No? You good?
No, thank you again, everyone, for paying attention. Thank you for being here, being part of the transit community. We really appreciate you guys. So we're here for you when and if you have questions.
That's awesome. Okay, so get in touch with them if you do. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Again, I apologize for any connectivity issues. I'm having them as well, which isn't terrific since I'm hosting the whole thing. Special thank you to Bailey and Courtney for their presentation and their patience and the participants' patience. As a reminder, everyone will be getting an invitation to fill out an eval survey for this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, so if you could just fill that out, that would be wonderful. If everyone is in the cold snap area, I hope you're staying warm, and have a good afternoon. Thanks, everybody.